The rain had been falling for 3 long days. It washed the streets of Cedarfield clean, but it couldn't wash away the weight people carried in their hearts. Among those hearts was Grace Miller's. She stood beneath a flickering diner sign, clutching a worn umbrella that barely held together. Her shoes were soaked, her coat was thin, and her hands trembled, not from the cold, but from fear. Through the window, she saw laughter, warmth, and the glow of people who still had something to live for. She pressed her palm against the glass and whispered, "Maybe one day that'll be me." Grace worked as a cleaner at a small motel. Long hours, little pay, trying to care for her 9-year-old brother, Ben, since their parents' car crash 2 years earlier. Life had taken almost everything from her, but not her hope. It was fragile, yes, like a single candle fighting against a storm, but it still burned. This is HQ Infinite Stories, where every story reminds us that kindness, courage, and love still exist. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to keep these lights shining one cold evening. After finishing another exhausting shift, Grace noticed a man by the parking lot struggling with his car. Steam hissed from the hood as he muttered under his breath. Despite her tiredness, Grace walked over, holding a small flashlight. "Need a hand?" she asked gently. The man looked up, surprised. He was tall, dressed simply, with eyes that carried the kind of weariness that comes from too much work and too little rest. "Looks like it overheated," he sighed. Grace leaned in, pointed at a loose hose and said, "You'll want to tighten that before driving again." He chuckled softly. "You sound like a mechanic?" She smiled shyly. "No. Just someone who's had to fix a lot of things alone." Something about her words lingered longer than the sound of the rain. "My name's Ethan," he said, offering his hand. "Grace," she replied. Neither of them knew it yet, but that moment, beneath the weak streetlight and falling rain, would change both their lives forever. The next morning, Grace nearly dropped her mop when she saw him again, not as a stranded traveler, but as the owner of the motel chain. He remembered her instantly. Smiling like he'd found something he didn't know he was missing after his meeting, he called her in. "You've been here 3 years, he said, glancing at her file. "Never missed a day." "That's rare." Grace nodded nervously. "You once said you've had to fix a lot of things alone." "I admire that," he added. "You? Remember that?" He smiled. "People like you are hard to forget." Then came the offer, 1 week as his temporary assistant while his regular one was away. Grace panicked. "Sir, I'm not qualified. I don't even have the right clothes." Ethan shook his head. "You don't need fancy clothes, Grace, just your honesty and your heart. That's worth more than any suit." For the first time in years, someone saw her not for what she lacked, but for who she was. She said yes. The week that followed was chaotic but full of firsts. She made mistakes, laughed nervously, and worked harder than anyone. Ethan saw it all, her kindness, her quiet strength. The way she respected everyone from the receptionist to the janitor. One evening, he invited her to a charity gala. Grace froze. I don't have anything to wear." He smiled warmly. "You don't need to. Just come as you are." That night, Grace wore her simple blue church dress. It wasn't designer, but it carried pride and grace. When people whispered that she didn't belong, Ethan simply said, "She's perfect the way she is." Under the glittering lights, he looked like a man who had everything except peace. She looked at him and whispered, "You seem lonely." He smiled faintly. "It's hard to find people who don't see the money first." "I see the man who helped a stranger in the rain," she said. That made him laugh. Really laugh. For the first time in a long while, from that moment, something changed. He started asking for her thoughts, sharing pieces of his past, his childhood struggles, and the cost of success. Grace listened. In her silence, he found comfort. When Ben fell sick, Ethan personally drove them to the hospital and waited until the doctor said he'd be okay. Grace cried that night, not from sadness, but gratitude. Rumors spread at work, whispers about the boss and the cleaner. One day, Grace overheard cruel laughter. It broke her heart. When she stepped out, Ethan was waiting. "Grace," he said softly, "don't let the noise of others drown out the truth of who you are." To lift her spirits, he took her to an orphanage supported by his charity. Watching her feed the children, Ethan realized she wasn't just kind. She was light. As the sun set, he whispered, "Grace, you've reminded me that goodness still exists." That night, she thought about him, not as her boss, but as the man who saw her worth before her status. And that scared her. Because love doesn't ask permission. It simply grows. At the company dinner, a few weeks later, Grace almost didn't go. But when she walked in, wearing that same blue dress, Ethan was waiting. "Dance with me," he said. "I don't know how." "Then I'll teach you." As they moved beneath the soft lights, surrounded by people who once doubted her, Grace felt something new, belonging. He leaned closer and whispered, "You don't need fancy clothes, Grace. You shine without them." Her eyes filled with tears. For the first time, she wasn't surviving, she was living. Months later, they launched a charity together to help single mothers find work. Grace became the heart of it all, touching countless lives. Every time she stood before a crowd in her same simple blue dress, she reminded the world that true grace isn't worn, it's lived. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to HQ Infinite Stories. Every act of kindness, every share, every word of love keeps hope alive. Now tell us in one word what this story made you feel. Hope, faith, love, or kindness. Because sometimes all it takes is one person who believes that you don't need fancy clothes to shine. You just need heart.